For Sunday, April 29th, you have found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, the Atlanta bonus scandal, the MacGyver verdict, and the May 22nd primaries, and more.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning, I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And it's good to have some guest panelists here today. Of course, we have our regular Alexis Scott, welcome, and Kathy Woolard. It's good to have you here, former Atlanta City Council president and a candidate for mayor last year. And attorney Carrie Ichter, thanks for coming back with us.
Delighted to be here.
Okay. Well, where do we start with former Mayor Kasim Reed's administration? It's almost like peeling back an onion. The more you peel it, the more scandal and waste that we see. I think I'll start off, and I'm going to go right down the table with this. I think we'll start off with some of the headlines from just the other day, and that is the 500. I'm having to look. It was the number was up $518,000 in bonuses for some of his top people in the Reed administration, and also wasteful spending on. It's incredible. Some of these party prizes that were thrown right at the end of December, and. I saw where City Council President Felicia Moore called them disgusting and illegal. I even saw, I thought this was a weak response, where Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, Chief of Staff, said they were, quote, excessive, unquote. Well, I'm going to ask you two questions. What does it mean for Mayor Reed and his legacy? And number two, what does it mean now as Mayor Bottoms deals with this going forward?
Okay, well, I think for Mayor Reed, it's not a good mark for his tenure. It was unknown until it became known by the investigation that's going on at City Hall, and also City Council members did not know about it either. So and the amount of the bonuses were like $15,000 and for some of the top people, and also the person that gave them out was a recipient of the bonuses too. So it is disturbing somewhat. However, I will say that it is a practice that is very prevalent in the private sector to give bonuses for employees. And I think that the Mayor Reed took advantage of the opportunity that he had by being an outgoing mayor to just do it. And he wanted to show his appreciation to the people who served him during his tenure. So unfortunately, I don't think he did it in the right way.
Well, Kathy Woolard, do you agree with Felicia Moore? Disgusting, illegal?
Yep, I do. I think it is. I think that even though the private sector does routinely give people bonuses for performance, they don't have karaoke contests, they don't do pin the tail on the donkey and you get $1,000. You know, I think $518,000 worth of taxpayer money given to people who are already well compensated, because we know the salary levels of some of the people who work for him, is outrageous. It was done, you know, at the 11th hour, which is also coincidentally when the council's on break. And so I think once we start to see the tally of taxpayer money that was frivolously spent, I think it's going to be quite a tally. I mean, think about the Cape Town trip. Think about the revelation today of Jim Beard, the CFO, going to Harvard for $60,000 and still receiving his pay.
Yes, the taxpayers are paying his tuition.
Yep. Katrina Parks, Taylor Parks, out on medical leave when she should be resigned as a way to extend her pay. You know, let's just start tallying it up. It is already in the millions. The single-digit millions could be in the double-digit millions by the time it's over.
Carrie?
I think that the word outrageous is entirely applicable. And to Alexis's point, yes, we had a mayor who is going out of office and now no longer has to face the judgments of the voters. So now, because he is in that unique position, he feels free to squander, to give away taxpayer money. We're talking about money that could have funded $105,000 raises for teachers, for police officers, for first responders, for firemen. and instead it's being given for ugly sweater contest winners. It's absolutely outrageous. And
is it illegal?
I think it is illegal, and particularly since it wasn't approved by the city council. And I think somebody needs, these things continue to emerge in the city of Atlanta, and one of the reasons is, since the Bill Campbell days in prosecution, nobody has been called to account when these things happen. Somebody needs to be prosecuted. The message needs to be sent that you cannot get away with just giving away taxpayer money.
I do think, though, that Mayor Bottoms has said that she is going to review this with an outside counsel to make sure, to investigate whether it is legal or not.
Well, but the Attorney General's office and the GBI ought to be the folks who are engaged in that, because all this means is that now one of the big law firms in town is going to charge tens of thousands of dollars to take a look at squandering hundreds of thousands of dollars. Government ought to be able and capable to police itself, and it's not happening.
Well, you're making a good point, and it kind of segues. You mentioned the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Let me go down the table again. Just the other day, Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents came into City Hall. What were they doing there? They were looking for violations of the Open Records Act. This has been yet another scandal that's occurred under former Mayor Reed. And you talk about accountability, Carrie. In my opinion, this city attorney who's still there under Mayor Bottoms, he ought to be fired immediately because of his resistance and obstructionism last year. And all of the media have been reporting this. City Council obviously is upset. I could go on, but what's your analysis? It's obvious Ann Torres, the former communications director, openly was texting, let's not give the public, we don't want them to know what's going on. How do you think this is going to go on under Mayor Bottoms?
Oh, I don't think it will. I think she is clear that she's not going to operate in the same fashion. But I think it is a problem for the city as an entity that is continuing from last year, even though there's a new mayor in town. But
why does she keep the city attorney, who's the focus of this obstruction, or other Reed officials?
I don't think she has completed her acceptance of all of the resignations. She asked for all of the resignations,
right,
and she's still going down the line. She did accept that for Torres, for the communication director. So I think it's just a matter of her having to work to get the house in order.
I think she's got to move faster, right? I mean, you have the time from December, first week of December when she got elected, to January, got sworn in first week. You had a month there where other mayors have routinely put their task force together to begin the search process and move people along. To wait 100 days to ask for the resignation versus asking for them the first day you got there has allowed 100 days to sort of dribble past. And I think there were people who it was clear should have been replaced from the outset that were in critical positions. There are people down the org chart that could have been interim or acting in that time, but she needs to clean house and then, fulfill the promise that all of us who were in the campaign talked about in terms of doing a procurement review and an ethics review and come out with recommendations. And that should have happened again first day with the recommendations coming out now. So she's got some catch up to do to make sure that people really understand she's serious about this.
And the Friday morning AJC reported on a text found on Ann Torres's device that said, that reflected what the actual Kasim Reed policy was, as opposed to the policy that was given lip service by the administration. It said, we can hold whatever we want for as long as we want, talking about government documents that were the subject of open records requests. And all that says is that tells the entire story. It's translated as follows: we are above the law.
Well, you have the last word on that one, Carrie. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some other topics, including that Tex MacGyver murder verdict. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And let's turn our focus to a statewide issue that occurred in the just concluded March end of the legislature. Carrie, it's a cyber bill, and you want the governor to veto it. What in the world, what's going on?
I do, and it's called the Georgia Computer Systems Protection Act, which is Senate Bill 315. And it makes illegal the, quote, unauthorized access of a computer or computer network that can result in fines of up to $5,000 and 1 year in jail. And the cybersecurity community is very concerned that the ambiguities in the way that the bill is written means that it would reach out to those people who are referred to as white hats or gray hats in the hacking world. Those folks are people who are out there looking at vulnerabilities of computer systems, identifying those and reporting them to the people who are the owners of those systems, so that they can bring about remedial measures to fix those vulnerabilities. But since those people don't have prior approval to access those systems, they could be considered to be violating the law, and there is concern in that community, in that business area, which, by the way, is a $4.7 billion business in Atlanta, that they are at risk. I hear that California is salivating over the idea of getting some of our cybersecurity business, because they will reach out to those businesses and the people who work in those businesses and explain to them, you are at risk. Why don't you come out to California, where we only have big fires and earthquakes?
Kathy, does he know what he's talking about?
Well, you know, he probably does, actually, but I still disagree with him a little bit on this. I think that language is pretty clear, that it exempts anybody that's taking active security measures to try to breach a firewall. But, you know, ambiguous legislation sometimes works to your you know, benefit, sometimes it doesn't. Here in Georgia, with a short legislative session, I think, you know, sometimes it's just worth going back to, you know, have a do-over.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we'll see what the governor does on that one. Let's talk about the high-profile Tex MacGyver murder trial. We got a verdict this past week, and as we know, the prosecutors, we didn't know what would happen when we had our show last week, but there was a malice murder that the prosecutors went for. And then, and this is what I don't like, again, I want to, anybody who wants to chime in, I don't like jury compromises. You know, they were deadlocked there that one afternoon, and then presto, all of a sudden, they came with a so-called compromise, which I don't think was a compromise at all. Tex MacGyver still ends up with life in prison. And Carrie, what do you think of, isn't this a flaw in the judicial system?
Well, it definitely seems like a compromise, given that the question that they asked immediately before returning that verdict was, if we quit on counts 1 through 4, which were all the murder and aggravated assault counts, can we still convict on the what was essentially a witness tampering claim or a charge? And the answer was yes. And then they turn around and they come back, and what they did was they convicted on felony murder, which is essentially killing somebody without actually intending to do so. It can be an accidental killing.
Right.
They found apparently no intent, because they rejected the malice murder charge, but then turned around and they found guilty on aggravated assault, which has as one of its elements intent. So the only conclusion that we can come to is that he intended to, he didn't intend to shoot her, or he didn't intend to kill her.
How about that?
He intended to shoot her, but he didn't intend to kill her by shooting her, which is completely inconsistent with the theory of the case by the state, which was he wanted to kill her because of her money.
Right, and it is very inconsistent, and also you kind of wonder, some of the jurors actually said afterwards they didn't understand if they went with felony murder that he'd still get life imprisonment. So,
Well,
what do you think?
They didn't want him to go to prison?
The jurors seem, at least a couple jurors seem confused on that.
Well, I don't know. I think they might need a do-over on that one, too.
I think so.
Well, they are appealing.
Yeah, I certainly can.
Well, the other
imagine that.
thing is that the judge, after the close of the evidence and the state rested, admitted into evidence, after those two things had occurred, the SUV, which had not been offered into evidence. And then the jury got to go down and climb into the SUV, and apparently that was meaningful in their deliberations. They got to see something.
But that could be grounds for appeal. I mean, someone could have been moving the seat back and forth. It was unsecured. I didn't get that part.
Exactly.
But anyhow, here's one right up your alley, Alexis.
What's that?
You and I regularly tangle on the issue of what I call the Second Amendment right of all Americans to keep and bear arms. Did you see where the Lawrence County school system is now going to vote on having some school personnel have concealed, and these are people that have got their permits, have some concealed weapons to protect the kids in case anything happens?
Yeah, I think that's a ridiculous thing to do. To
Protecting the kids?
No, to arm teachers and educators who are not trained in law enforcement or how to use protective issues other than just shooting deers and stuff. I just think they need to do that.
Anybody have any opinions on that?
I think it's a last-ditch effort to try to do something about a situation that, you know, might occur. I mean, when we start addressing common sense gun laws, closing the gun show loophole, you know, making sure that people don't break into the White House with a, you know, a machine gun and then get their weapon back later so that they can use it again. I mean, these are loopholes that just have to be closed.
But that's at the federal level. We're talking about
we can do things
schools are
at the
trying to
state
protect things now.
But if you've got people
Carrie,
getting
we got
guns
about
back,
30
it's
seconds
crazy.
if you want to weigh in.
I just saw the movie Tombstone, and back in the days of Wyatt Earp, they used to take away your gun at the city limits.
That's right.
And it's not because they thought that guns contributed to safety, peace, and harmony. They kind of understood that the combinations of whiskey and guns tended to get people killed. I think that it is a wise thing to do to not have the Wild West.
Well, these are people, as you well know, these are
systems.
people that have gotten their permits, and you know, people that have carry permits in the state of Georgia, they're not the ones that are shooting people. You can call GBI and ask them about that. Well, when we return, we're going to be going down the road and talking about politics. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And can you believe it? Tomorrow is when early voting starts all around the state for the May 22nd party primaries, both Democrat and Republican primaries at the local level and, of course, at the state level. And don't forget that there are nonpartisan judicial races that are very important on this ballot. They'll be on all the ballots on May 22nd. In fact, I will mention very quickly, there's an interesting State Court of Appeals race. There's an open seat, and that'll be interesting to see who is going to take that seat. But let's talk about the Democratic gubernatorial primary first between the two candidates, Stacey Evans and Stacey Abrams. Sparks are flying. The ad wars have started. I think, Alexis, you've always thought that maybe Stacey Abrams is the front runner. Do you still think that, or do you think it's tightening?
I think she's still the front runner, and I don't think it's tightening. They did have a television debate this past week in Columbus, Georgia, in which they sort of went back and forth a little bit. But I just think the poll that came out also last week or week before last that showed Stacey Abrams with 33% and Stacey Evans with 15% is probably going to stay that way, or at least she's going to have a large.
But over 50% were undecided.
That's correct. That's correct, and that's why I guess the ad wars are important now, so people can get to know them. But I think that Stacey Evans has to go beyond just a bio type ad. And Stacey Abrams is continuing her strategy of going out into the field and with her offices out in the state and recruiting people inviting people to come to vote. So,
Kathy, what do you think?
Well, I think Abrams has some advantages because she's got several big PACs that are lined up, and she knows they're going to do TV, even though there's that firewall there that you can't speak about strategy. It's obvious what it is. So she can devote the resources she has to running a field effort. I do think Evans' ad is resonant. I think that the story that she's telling is really clear. I think some of Abrams' ads, because they're done by outsized entities, they're a little jumpy and they don't really enunciate a vision. I think that the goal for the two of them between now and May 22nd, and I'd say this, well, actually less so about the Republicans, is those two women, somebody's got to talk about a vision, and I think they cannot leave out Atlanta voters. It's the biggest chunk of voters, and there's some serious issues in Metro Atlanta. You got transportation, housing affordability, all those things we talked about in the mayor's race. Right. Somebody needs to talk about what they're going to do about it.
Right. I agree with you, and I know that Stacey Abrams is planning a big rally Monday night to sort of help solidify and excite the metro Atlanta area.
Carrie, let's talk about the Republican primary. Pundits think that Casey Cagle, Lieutenant Governor, might be the front runner, although it's kind of similar to the Democratic primary. It's fractured among several candidates. The big question is who's going to get in the #2 runoff. Mathematically, I've always said that it's impossible for anyone to get 50+1, and I think there's jockeying between Hunter Hill and perhaps Brian Kemp. And what's your take on that?
Well, I think that's exactly right. It's a sort of a two-man race, but a different kind of two-man race to the extent that Cagle is a gimme with respect to getting into the runoff. And he is recently, I think, trying to manage expectations by saying there's going to be a runoff. So it's going to be between Hunter Hill and Brian Kemp, although Clay Tippins is working hard, particularly with some of the ad war stuff that we were talking about last week, in trying to bloody up some of the front runners. And so it's still early, I would say. It's still relatively
I think
early.
With more ads coming, I agree with you
for
on
that
both
second
sides.
tier. It's still early.
I'm thinking Clay Tippins is the long shot here. Again, in terms of the ads, he's actually spelling out a vision.
Right.
He's taken on some hard issues. And if you look at the money on that second tier, what they've raised, what they've got on hand, and what they've spent is really quite the same for all of them. So I think it'd be kind of interesting to see Clay Tippins and Casey Cagle, emerge from that primary, so you could really start to see, are we going to be a moderate Republican, business-oriented state, or are we going to appeal to the right wing on these kind of, religious freedom, punish corporations kind of things.
Well, all the candidates on the Republican side are for religious freedom. I would hope some Democrats are too.
Yeah, well, not the kind that's been proposed.
It's all a question
includes
of how
discrimination.
ardent they are about it.
Yeah, and if they're willing to be, constitutional.
Well, let's not
about it.
forget, of course, there are other state constitutional offices, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, the Insurance Commissioner. With his Lieutenant Governor's race, I think that David Schaefer probably has got a leg up in that Republican primary.
And John Barrow in the Democratic
John Barrow
side.
is probably the high profile of all those constitutional offices in the Democrats. So we'll watch that in the general election. Well, it's almost time for winners and losers, so stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams, and this is our favorite segment. So, Carrie, we're going to start with you on winners and losers.
Well, as a matter of personal privilege, I will declare myself a winner this week because my beautiful and lovely daughter, Chloe Woodhouse, is here visiting me for this week from Madison, Wisconsin, and whenever she comes to visit, it's a wonderful time. So, but Bill Cosby. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Such a great, respected entertainer who has now been convicted on sexual assault charges. It's just, it's really a heartbreaking outcome. It's a heartbreaking story, I think, all the way around. Veterans continue to be losers in the sense that they're victims of incompetence at the VA. And we've been trying to fix that by appointing somebody who can run that administration, $200 billion a year, 360,000 employees. We need somebody with administrative and executive competence. We would think that this president, who comes from the business community, could go out and find the best executive, because that's what our veterans deserve. Find the best talent to manage that behemoth.
Kathy?
Let's see, winner Kim Jong-un, I think, is the winner. He's his nuclear proliferation.
The tin horn dictator of North Korea?
He is, but I mean, he's now brought South Korea to the table to negotiate with him. Our president is going there. China is bending over backwards.
Is the president the winner for making all this happen?
Hey, listen, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying he's a winner, right? I mean, he has manipulated the world to his best devices to end the isolation that they've had. Jim Beard, former CFO of the city of Atlanta, big cash winner, big cash prize, getting on payroll through May, and a $60,000 Harvard scholarship after he's supposed to leave office. And then Kirby Smart, I know this is a week late, but man, the Dog Nation is loving him. The spring game was a lot of fun, and he was out there showing
I'm with you.
what we
Go
got.
Dogs.
And then the big losers, I'll just stick with this one, Atlanta taxpayers, big losers all around. We just find it
Amen.
out every single week.
Got about a minute there,
Okay, I'm
Alexis.
going to rush through, but I want to apologize to Thomas Glenn II for muffling the name of the family foundation. It's the Wilbur and Hilda Glenn Family Foundation that was honored last week by the AIB network. So congratulations again to them, and my apologies for messing up the name. And also Charmin Goins of the YWCA and Erica Qualls Beatty was named the Woman of the Year at their annual Salute to Women of Achievement, and they inducted 10 additional women into their Academy of Women Achievers. So congratulations to all of them.
Very good. I'm going to squeeze in a couple losers. I agree with Kathy. The Atlanta taxpayers were definitely losers as we find out more revelations of shenanigans under former Mayor Reed. And I'm going to delve into a GOP primary around the Dalton area for a state Senate seat. And I've got a loser, State Senator Chuck Payne. He's being challenged by Scott Tidwell. He's one of the good guys. This Payne absolutely has been voting against basic Homeland Security type bills this last session. We've all been watching you, Senator Payne, and I hope you lose in the primary. And I rarely give opinions like this, right?
Rare.
Stay with us for the Georgia Gang next week.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.